We have new details this morning about the House Oversight Committee's interview of longtime Jeffrey Epstein assistant Sarah Kellen. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer says Kellen provided 3 new names of alleged abusers in Epstein's network. In 2007, federal prosecutors labeled her a potential Epstein co-conspirator, but Kellen told congressional investigators that she is an abuse survivor herself. CNN's Annie Grayer is in Washington. Now, Annie, you spoke to Comer after that closed-door interview. Tell us, what did he say?
Yeah, Danny, this is some of the most candid that I've heard from Chairman Comer, in that he said Kellen provided them with really substantive information that's providing them with potential new leads to go down and new names of potential alleged abusers for them to look into. Now, this interview happened behind closed doors, and Comer is not revealing the names of the 3 individuals, but he says that his committee is going to be working to release this transcript of the closed door interview as quickly as possible. Take a listen to how he framed it all to us yesterday.
Of all the people that we've interviewed thus far, this was by far the most substantive and productive interview that we've had. She gave us 3 names of people that were involved in abuse. These were new names for us. So we'll be releasing the transcript as quickly as possible.
Can you share the names of those abusers now?
We'll get them as quickly as possible. And it's still going on, so I don't want to do that. But you'll find out very soon.
Now, Kellen is considered a controversial figure in Epstein's orbit because, as you mentioned, she was listed as a potential co-conspirator back in 2007. But in her closed-door interview yesterday, she laid out in great detail how she was actually a victim of Epstein's abuse. And we received her opening statement to see those specifics there. And she was asked a lot of questions about her experience as a victim of Epstein's abuse. She was also asked about her views on Ghislaine Maxwell, who is Epstein's co-conspirator, currently serving prison time. And she was asked what her views were on Maxwell and if Maxwell should be moved to a lower security prison. Kellen said no, according to a Democrat in the room. She was also asked if she believed that Maxwell should receive a presidential pardon. And Kellen also said that she didn't believe that either. Now, all of this gives the committee a lot of new information to look at, but at least one Democrat in the room, Raja Krishnamoorthi, told reporters after that while Kellen was forthcoming in some areas, because she was in the room voluntarily, she didn't have to answer all of the committee's questions. And because she has so much potential information for the committee, they may consider wanting to call her back under subpoena. But a lot of information for the committee to go through before their next big interview with former Attorney General Pam Bondi next week.
Yeah, a lot indeed. Fascinating developments. Annie Grayer, thank you for that great reporting. Really do appreciate it.
Let me ask you about something else that happened today that I know is very important to you, and that is the testimony we heard to Sarah Kellen, Jeffrey Epstein's assistant for 15 years. She says she's one of Epstein's victims as well. Now, you were in a closed-door deposition with her today, so you heard the questions, you heard the answers. I know that, among other things, she shared with your committee 3 names that are new names, Congressman Khanna, that she says are tied to the abuse of young girls. What more can you tell us tonight?
Well, I believe her. These 3 men assaulted her. I don't want to say the specific names, but I will leave it as one is a business person, politician, and other 2 were celebrities. And it shows how broad this Epstein class is, of men who either assaulted, abused, trafficked with young girls and with women. And that's why we need justice. This was not just Epstein. This was not Maxwell acting alone. This was powerful men who abused women who are still out free and haven't faced justice.
Can I just ask you a question about these names? Were they, you're saying they were new, right? So presumably they're not names that we've seen mentioned in the files. Were you surprised or shocked when you heard their names?
They were not people familiar to me. They are a prominent politician and 2 celebrities. I'm sure eventually the names will come out. But the point is that these are prominent people who assaulted her. And she didn't want to say who assaulted some of the other girls. She felt that could implicate her, but we need to follow up with her under oath to see what she knew about the other men who were abusing the other girls.
All right, so on that point, let me ask you something, because obviously you're talking about the abuse she endured herself, which is horrific. She said she spent years being sexually and psychologically abused by Epstein, and she said in the statement we understand today, and I'll read from it, Congressman, I want this committee to know that the abuse happened on average on a weekly basis and was at times violent. It included an occasion in Palm Beach when he trapped me in the gym by lowering the metal hurricane shutter, blasted the music so loud no one could hear, choked me, and violently raped me. Now, Congressman, I've been watching some of the back and forth on your committee, and that there were questions on whether she was a victim or also an accomplice in her role as an assistant and what she was doing for Epstein vis-a-vis other girls. You were in the room, right? You saw her. You heard her testimony. You watched her body language. You heard her voice. How do you navigate that fine line?
I believe she's a victim. Look, this happened with a number of survivors where they were raped, they were abused, they were trafficked, and then at a young age, to save themselves, they may have assisted Epstein in recruiting other girls, or may have assisted Epstein just to prevent the abuse on them. I view all of those as victims of Epstein, and I view her as a victim who faced horrific rape and assault.
Police investigating the former Prince Andrew are renewing their call for anyone with information to come forward. They also say they are reaching out to a woman who claims that she was taken to an address in Windsor for, quote, sexual purposes. Now, the brother of King Charles was arrested in February on suspicion of misconduct in public office. That followed the release of the Epstein files, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. The former Prince denies any allegations of wrongdoing. Let's get you to London and to CNN's royal correspondent, Max Foster. Good to have you, Max. British police do appear to be broadening their misconduct investigation. They are calling it, as I understand, complex. What's the latest as we understand it?
Well, it's complex because it's a complex charge. So this misuse of the position effectively is actually quite broad. So they're saying it's not a broadening of the investigation. It's always looked at abuse of position. So that would have stretched from sharing documents, but also to potentially allegations or suggestions of sexual abuse as well. But they've put out this statement because they want to make everyone aware of the breadth of this investigation and effectively to call for more witnesses as well. They do talk about a case they are looking at in 2010, but they haven't, and they've reached out to the woman involved, but they haven't spoken to her. They're really putting out the message that if you have any complaints, do bring them into this investigation. In terms of the complexity, Becky, it's because they've clearly found a lot of files and documentation that they're going through. So it's become large. We know that they've been going through, they took Andrew's computers, for example, so presumably more information is coming to light, but they are saying the investigation hasn't changed. It was always broad, and they're just reminding the public of how broad it is and for any witnesses to come forward, Andrew denying any wrongdoing, of course.
Documents relating to Mountbatten Windsor's appointment as British trade envoy back in 2001, I think both of us will remember that, have been released now. He was never formally vetted. That's, one of the sort of key takeouts from this. How significant is that? And what else do these documents reveal?
Well, that he wasn't vetted, that no one else was considered, but also that there were officials asking the question, does he have the right experience for this, when he's just come out of the Navy? Of course, at the time, there was no knowledge of any relationship that he had with Epstein. I think one of the headlines that's really grabbed attention here in the UK is that through these documents, we learned that the Queen pushed for Andrew to get this position, and perhaps the government capitulated to that. The Queen was allowed to do that. She wouldn't have expected any of these documents to become public. They have become public now. It was a government decision. So now pressure back on the government as to why they effectively gave Andrew this shoe-in position and didn't consider anyone else. He did have a relative who was previously in the position, and those defending the decision are also pointing out that royals are already cleared to work on trade work already because of their broader role. But it does shed more light on how he got this position, which is really at the center of many of the Epstein allegations hovering around him.
We're joined now by Eric Fudali, an attorney who represents 11 Epstein accusers. Eric, thanks for coming back on the program. I wonder how, as you're looking at this reporting, how the decision is aging, that desire of the Queens to have Andrew in this role and his apparent placement in it without vetting.
Well, it's certainly not aging well, given what we know about Prince Andrew, or former Prince Andrew, and Jeffrey Epstein's relationship, to sort of frame it some way, right? We absolutely know that Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein were very closely aligned, spent a lot of time together. And of course, there's been very salacious allegations against Prince Andrew, former Prince Andrew, for which the reporting is that he actually settled the case for a substantial amount of money. So it has certainly not aged well. And really, the relationship between former Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein is something that I think continues to need to be investigated. I appreciate that there's been some level of perhaps accountability in Great Britain with his brief arrest, but I still think that there needs to be a lot more investigation, tough questions, and looking into what former Prince Andrew did along the side with Jeffrey Epstein and what actually their relationship entailed.
Today, the House Oversight Committee is interviewing Sarah Kellen, a longtime Epstein assistant, a potential co-conspirator. That's how Florida federal prosecutors considered her as they investigated Epstein almost 20 years ago. But Chairman Comer said they're split, the committee is, on whether to treat her as a victim or a perpetrator. How are you looking at this?
Split as well. I think that's a fair assessment of it. This is a very, very complicated case. Now, I obviously cannot speak to the specific details of Ms. Kellen's relationship or what she actually did alongside Jeffrey Epstein. What I can say generally, however, is that Jeffrey Epstein was a master manipulator, and he was very adept and very good at manipulating those very people who he had power over, and also other powerful people to doing whatever he wanted. Now, again, Ms. Kellen, of course, was an adult, and she can make her own, she has to be accountable for her own decisions. But I can say generally that Jeffrey Epstein did victimize a lot of women and did also manipulate a lot of those victims into helping him facilitate finding other victims. So yeah, I agree that this is sort of very split. It is a very complicated case as to how this interview is approached. What I will say is not complicated is that she may be a source of information. She is someone who was very close to Jeffrey Epstein for a long period of time, especially after 2008, the sweetheart deal. She continued to be associated with Jeffrey Epstein. And I think it's very important to learn what she saw and perhaps even who she saw closely aligned with Jeffrey Epstein after 2008. Because remember, after 2008, despite the fact that he got a very sweetheart deal, Jeffrey Epstein was a registered sex offender, and that was public knowledge. So I hope the committee uses her interview as a means of getting actual information about who continued to closely align themselves, closely associate with, and hopefully perhaps even closely facilitate a registered public sex offender.
Comer also reinforced that former Attorney General Pam Bondi will be in for an interview next week. There is not going to be, there will be, I should say, a transcript. There's not going to be video of this. Does this interview have utility for victims?
I'd love to say yes. Unfortunately, given the way basically every single thing, every single aspect of this has been handled by the DOJ, by this administration, I don't have high hopes. Remember last time Pam Bondi was in front of Congress as it relates to Jeffrey Epstein, she basically put on like an hour-long temper tantrum with zero information, where she just had these rehearsed, insults to hurl back at the congresspersons who were asking her questions. She couldn't even look at the survivors in the eye, couldn't even pretend to have even a shred of empathy for what the survivors and the victims of Jeffrey Epstein have been through. So I actually intend to probably be in DC for this hearing or for this interview. I think it should be open. I think it should be under oath. I think it should be videotaped. I think the public should be able to see Pam Bondi answer these questions. Unfortunately, that's not where we're going to get. I will take what we can get, and I at least think an interview with her, a transcribed interview with her, is better than nothing, but it's not nearly enough.
Eric Fudali, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.